Okay, supposedly we're up. We're gonna try. Okay. So we like we were just talking about synchronicities kind of happen, and you find, like you said, you want to be open to conversations, and you don't necessarily feel like you're the one supposed to be driving it, but be open to it. And I'm kind of experiencing that same thing. I tried a lot to make these types of conversations happen, and I would have them with the wrong people. I would rush the conversation; it'd go crazy. I would have, it just went terrible. But anyways, but I've noted there's a place called This Little Corner of the Internet on YouTube, and it was basically a group of people that started around a pastor that was following Jordan Peterson. The only reason I'm bringing them up is that I started learning a lot as they were building their network or whatever around it, that it just started manifesting in the comment section basically. And now they're like meeting up in like real time, having like events and stuff like that. It's been pretty crazy to watch it scale. Actually, I think somebody's going to do a documentary on it, honestly. But the scaling issue, or the scaling of it and the networking of it, and that's what you're talking about is that sometimes we like for me, like I got to drive this. I got to pick up the ball and just run with it, and try to make it happen. And every time I do that, it's not working. It's frustrating. It leads to like just yeah, and I fizzle out and abandon the project. Kind of like what you were talking about, and that. But it seems like, yeah, like sometimes this sort of thing happens and it works out, and we got to be open to that and just see what kind of happens with that, because I think me and you are supposed to talk.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. No, and as I've been getting to the Catholic Church, I've just been noticing how a network functions, and how a network that spans 2,000 years has functioned, and it's still functioning through wars and empires rising and falling and everything like that. And it really seems to just center around people getting quiet and sacrificing some time and energies and things like that, to allow the network to flow, and just I even, for some reason, this has started as I look at, I was trying to figure out like the cross, and you stare at it so much and everything like that, and I don't know why, but it just like, I was like, it's a intersection, it's a node, it's a network. It's like a node in a network. And like, I don't know, it's my own little thing in my crazy brain, but it's just like, yeah, I think that's what we're supposed to do, is link up and and share
Like,
what's
oh
going
yeah.
on. And yeah. So yeah, so back to kind of that, just kind of explains why we're having this conversation and everything. But the what I wanted, or I mentioned some topics that were not topics, but course of the conversation we're going to try to have. And basically what you talked about, like 2019, you tried to start the podcasting thing, and I think that's when I started seeing you kind of go in this direction. Or you had already come from, you said you were teaching at the time and things like that, so obviously that's a lot to try to bring into what led you to today. But yeah, can you kind of tell me like what got you to where you're at right now?
Yeah, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version because there's probably a more than anybody even wants to know. But in
Mm,
2019, so I was married for like 12 years, had the nuclear family, had two kids, everything seemed to be going well. I kind of had a change of heart just with like our lifestyle and the way that we were living our life. One of the biggest things was a culture of alcohol that I was a part of for many, many years. And then I just like got so sick and tired of doing that, that I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I had a really bad experience. So it started with me just like changing my life. I also started going to CrossFit and
mm,
started a community there.
remember
So
that.
I was like influenced by more like healthy, happy people. And so I was like, okay, I'm changing paths. I want to be healthier. I want to change like the dynamic of our family, the culture of our family. And my husband at the time was just like not really into that. Which I realized that that's okay. Like if people are like, hey, I don't want to change like he has the right to live the life that he wants to, and I also have the right to live the life that I want to. So we decided to separate, and then through that separation, we did pretty good. I'm really proud of how like responsible we were through all of that, and still continue to co-parent and everything. So it was through that that I like all of a sudden had all this time whenever he had the kids, because we were like 50-50, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I not only do I have time, but like I'm sober and I feel good because I'm like fit, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, what am I gonna do with myself? Um, so I started, I tried to like write a book. I started this podcast called the Noble Cause Podcast.
Mhm.
And it started off with, it was pretty much just like me teaching kind of lessons that I was learning through this like major shift in my life. And at that point in time, like I definitely had elements of like law of attraction, like energy, vibration, this type of stuff. And I will put a little like plug in for that, because I have had so much of a change and a shift in my life since then, that I've been like focused on like my new life, that I haven't really like reflected too much about like where I was before, and picked out the pieces that were still good, I guess.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I try not to condemn everything, just because I think that that's like a crazy way to like, that's very like extreme. So,
Mhm.
but I do know now that I was in a place that I was probably speaking like definitely more in the line of um like your own divinity, as opposed to like now I definitely live as if like I am not divine, but I follow a divine God. So like that's the biggest difference. And the podcast was great. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was really good content. I talked about like relationships. I talked about mental health. I talked about like just encouraging people. You know, I talked about entrepreneurship and nutrition and health and like all this stuff. So it was good for that sake. But what happened? So 2020, I met Nate, who's my husband,
Mhm.
and it was like fireworks. It was like all everything crazy happening. I thought that I like manifested him, right? Like
Okay.
he was like exactly who, and I had been working on manifesting this perfect relationship.
Yeah.
I'd also been following some people online that were like, um there's this one guy, I won't say his name just because whatever, but
Yeah. Yeah.
like he was talking about like all this stuff that was happening and like this shift, and so like you got to be prepared, and some of the stuff like he talked about, like I literally like started, it was like a worksheet. I started like working through like his teachings, you know, and it like shifted everything in my world, right? So I was like, oh my God, like I'm like on this path, right? Because that's what a lot of that like tells you, is that like you're gonna ascend, and like it'll change your life, and like people that don't ascend with you, like you're not gonna be compatible with them, and like all this stuff, right? Super interesting whenever I look back at it now. So
Right.
whenever and my friend just like out of the blue was like, hey, I have somebody that I want you to meet, just because like you guys talk about a lot of the same things, like my husband and I, very um like motivational speaker, entrepreneurship, like that whole thing. So whenever I met him, I was like, oh my God, like he's like God's gift to me, right? And then all this crazy stuff happened. Like I ended up being in this like really intense relationship, like all of my like boundaries like just went to the wind, and I went from like a very secure, long, somewhat boring relationship, you know what I mean? Like, but very stable, like with my ex-husband.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had like never met somebody like this. I had never been exposed to something like that. So then the COVID happened, and
Yeah.
yeah, and he was like, this is the end of the world. Like he had people, long story, but he had like special forces, people like soldiers up at his property, like training, and they got pulled out because they're like, there's this virus, this is like real deal. And so I thought it was crazy, but he was literally like you are like my person, you need to come here, like I need to protect you. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can't just pick up and leave. Like I have kids, I have like my mama's taking care of, you know, like I have a job. But I was like,
Yeah.
all right, dude. So I remember that weekend and I went and talked to my kids' dad. I talked to my boss at the gym. And then I talked to my mom and I was just like, I'm going away for the weekend. I'm taking the kids with me. If they shut down the schools, I'm gonna stay. And everybody was like, that's never gonna happen. I said, if they shut down the schools, I'm going to stay. And what happened? You
What
know, like,
happened?
oh my gosh. And then everybody's like, you should stay up there. I'm like, yeah, you
It got crazy in towns. You should just stay up there. That's where everybody wants to go anyways.
So I ended up spending like, it was up in Victor, Colorado, 54 acres. My husband found on the Gray Wolf Resort, which is an agritourism resort. The idea of it is to have a boutique family farm, lodging to like, our really like the family goal is to just have like a quality of life to where you're self-sustainable, to where you get to spend time with your family, to where you have unique streams of revenue within agriculture to be able to support that way of life so you can actually make money. So that's why we had lodging and stuff. So that was like the story I was told. That was
Yeah.
the story, right?
Yeah.
Reality was much different. Reality was Nate was living in a shed with no running water, and it was $1 million property, and his business partner completely abandoned him. And it was like, and there's like 5 other people living up there, and everybody was like getting high all the time. And like, it was just like, oh, whoa. Like,
Yeah.
like I got my kids up here. Like, what is happening? This is what happens when you don't know somebody very well. Sorry, my cat's like trying to break down my door.
It's okay. My 2-year-old or my soon to be 2-year-old's trying to like get through the door.
We're just gonna bust in sooner than later.
Yeah.
So like super like long story cut, very short. The next 4 years was freaking insane. Lots of like crises, bad crises, almost lost my husband multiple times. Just crazy stuff. So I was I couldn't even like try, like I found myself in his shadow and very uncomfortable with it, because there was this element of what felt very false to me, but I like believed it and I didn't have like proof, and I wanted it to be true. So like it was a hard thing for me to like put myself into this thing and be this person that I want so badly to be. But it was like, and it was because there was not stability. There was not it was not carefully done. Let's just say that. And then it was out of control, right? And I don't do well in out of control situations. So it got out of control. Eventually, much farther down the line. And I did try like with the podcast like multiple times. I remember I did like a couple episodes, you know, I was like, oh, I got that one. Like I got that lesson. Like I can talk about that one. And they were really good. And I also through that time, like my kids, of course, there was like a year of COVID to where like I homeschooled my kids. I had them up in Victor with me. But for the rest of that time, I freaking hustled my ass back and forth 6.5 hours to be here for my kids, up there, down here, like renting places down here, like being in other people's houses. It was just like the things that I did to try to make it all work was absolutely insane. And it completely like drove me into the ground ultimately. So fast forward, 2023. Things got really bad, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. But I still like loved my husband, and I still was like, hey, like we can't do this, but like if the dream is to have a family and to have a farm, like come with me, like let's go to Cortez where we have support, where we have people. The costs are much lower there. It's like a food mecca. Like we can, you know, like we can really like do this thing. And so he was like reluctant, but like convinced me that he was like doing that. But then come to find out he was like not doing that. And he was like doing all kinds of other things with other people that was like against what we were doing. Anyways, so unfortunately, like he struggled a lot with like narcissism, and I didn't know until, it's crazy because it's like, and this is why I know what's going on in the world, because I'm like, this is like gaslighting. Like it's like a cult thing. It's like you don't see it when you're in it, but once you get
Mhm.
out of it, you're like, oh wow, those were like huge red flags everywhere. So like I had to learn about that. That was a really hard thing to learn, but I loved him very, very much. And so I was like willing to like, if you still like, let's still do the thing. Like, but you gotta like delete all your social media. You gotta like redeem yourself from all this crap, you know? It's like, and you have to let me heal through all this, which that got so messy. Whenever you like allow somebody like, let me just like shit all over you for like as long as I need to, like, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of intense.
A
So
little bit, yeah.
I don't know that's necessarily the healthiest. In hindsight, I'm like, I'm not sure that was really the healthiest thing, you know?
No, no, and like, yeah, and what I'm learning is just like my marriage. I had a marriage before, and it had deteriorated due to narcissism and terrible, like just alcohol and everything. And I'm not over all my hurdles. Like I'm very like it's hard for me to see outside of myself, and like I can see it on other people's faces how they're reading me, and sometimes I just don't care. And I know I should, but I just don't sometimes. Where they're like giving you that like look like you need to like shut up and I need to like get away from you. I'm like, no, come here, get closer. It's like I'll talk to you. But it just and so yeah, as you're saying, talking about things and the horrible things that men do to our wives and the women in our lives, and it just it's marriage we have this image in our head that like it's what fixes you, and it does, but it is like it's so, like you said, messy. And one of the first things that when I came to the Catholic Church, they handed us a book because me and Anita still are not actually married.
Mm,
So what we did, we were living together, and because of my divorce, I never wanted to get married again.
mm.
And I did not want that to be. It was so hard to break apart, and then that like to have a judge be like, you owe this woman this amount every month no matter what. And it's like, okay, and it's like, and it's based off your pay and all this kind of like, and then like having to come up with like schedules and stuff like that. And I figured it out, but well, I guess I figured it out. I don't know. It was like a lot of yelling and fighting. And
They figured it
it's
out
like,
for you.
I, I mean, it happened, and now I'm here. So does that mean you figured it out? I don't know that that's what that means, but I get these moments where I get really close to Christ, and I look back and I see him and how everything was done to get me to today. And like, but then I get out of balance or something like that, and I can't see it anymore. And it's like, and then you got to crawl back to that to try to get back to that place. But yeah, I was saying when I came into the church, me and Anita, we weren't married, and they had handed us a book, and because I told pastor basically I want to get married to this woman because I feel like that's what God would have me to do, and what's the right thing to do because we're living together, and we're planning to have a kid and that, and we want to get our life started together right in that, and so we got to get married in a church and that, and I was like, I want a traditional wedding, I want a traditional like priest to marry us. And I didn't know to get married in the Catholic Church, you have to be Catholic. And so I was like, okay, well, that's the first step. What do we got to do to become Catholic? And he was like, well, do you know about Vatican II? And Father Susai is an Eastern Indian guy. So there was a lot of like, I barely understood what he was saying a lot of times. And I was like, yeah, I know about that kind of. Anyways, we get into catechism, and basically I'm like, we should get married, right? And he's like, "Yeah, don't rush it." And I'm like, that seems weird for a priest to say. Like, I'm living with this woman, like
Yeah.
she's gonna have a kid, like, and he's like, "Yeah, we'll get there." He's like, "Get through catechism, get confirmed." He's like, "Don't rush it at that." And every time I go back, and I'm like, "Yeah, like we just found out Anita's pregnant again," and I was a little bit nervous to tell father because I haven't been very good about getting this marriage process going because we got to get our previous marriages annulled, and there's a traditional way to handle divorces and stuff like that in the Catholic Church. And it's a process. I mean, it's not as long of a process as I've made it, but it's a process, you know. And if you tell me I need to, you know, fill any sort of paperwork out, well, I'm just going to push that off as long as I can. So, anyways, and so it's been this like, you know, thing that my parents are like, yeah, when is this happening? And they're, you know, they drop hints and they're frustrated. I'm like, my priest isn't putting any pressure on me. I don't know why you guys are, you know, and things like, and trying to get comfortable with my own life. But anyways, again, I'm still trying to get to the point I was trying to make. When we were in catechism, they knew about our situation and that, and um, they handed us a book, and I still haven't gotten into it, but I thought it was an interesting title. I said, "Life is Messy," and it was by Matthew Kelly, and it was just talking about how when we come to Christ, we don't come, you know, there's a way to come to Christ and you know coming all dressed up and everything like that's good, you know, and all that, and you know having all your stuff squared away. But he's really effective when you're torn to shit,
Oh
and
yeah.
that, when you're shredded out, when you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, or where I'm going. Like that's and what I've learned is like that's where he wants me because like it's weird how like we're talking about storms in life, right? Like we're talking about divorces, we're talking about crazy, you know, relationships, husbands, you know, flipping out and everything like this. And you know, Anita wasn't with me during COVID, but I did a little bit of a similar thing. I ain't got money to run away or anything like that, but I was like, I was listening to Rogan, like, you know, pacing back and forth at my house, like, you know, smoking like 3 nicks a day, you know, like
Yep.
just being like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? You know, like this vaccine doctor tells me like it's all a thing for this, and Wuhan said this, and you know, and I voted for the orange guy, so am I responsible? You know, and it's like, and like you know, all this stuff, and you're just shredded out. You can't handle it. It's information overload. Nobody's supposed to be able to operate at that level. Like you get, like maybe somebody can. I'm not him. And to be okay, like, and to realize I'm a man living in this age, and I'm not ready for today, and that's okay because no hunter gatherer in the history of men was really ever that ready. You know, it's like you could always get killed by a tiger. You could always get killed by a water buffalo. You know, it's like you don't know what's going to happen day to day, and there's a that is so human to be in that state of what we experience as anxiety, but somehow primitive humans, and I'm Native American, you know that, and I'm not raised traditional. I've learned a lot about it on YouTube, you know, because like I wasn't raised on the res or anything. Yeah, I'm an Indian that had to go to YouTube to learn about my people, you know, and it's like, and it's funny, but it's like, you know, and I feel like a broken Indian. I'm like, yeah, you know, like if you're looking for the dude that like you know could do the dances and stuff, I'm not him, but I am half of a tribe that's like the oldest tribe in the world, or in the continental United States, and you know, and it's very spiritual. It's a very religious tribe, and it has a lot, and it has a history with the Catholic Church, you know, and things like that, and it just there's so much about the messiness and the craziness that is so so human, and just how flawed we really are, and like how we get into these really, I don't know, for me this is where I continually find myself getting healthy is right after a shattering, you know, right after, you know, a shoe dropped, you know, Bill showed up, didn't know it was going to be there, you know, car died, you know, whatever, and it's like I go into like I'm an alcoholic. You know, I struggle with alcohol. I have given it up for years at a time. I still have problems with benders and things like that. I've always been able to pull it back in and get it under, you know, to control, but it's something I've struggled with for a really long time. And you know, I got a brother that's doing the sober thing, but he's basically, in my opinion, AA, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way, but in my opinion, just from listening to Jordan Peterson and a lot of these other guys, humans are religious by nature. It's one of our ways that, like we said, in that anxiety, we connected to Creator, you know, and so we're religious by nature. And for me, I see him, his sobriety is the most important thing. Like it's like the number one thing I must do, and I have to do this is like my life depends on it, is to remain sober. And I get that, I really do, and I see him getting healthier. I see him, you know, loving his wife and things like this. But I did not want to join the cult of AA, and I'm not saying that it was. I'm not, and it. I'm not. Like I said, it. I wasn't scared to give up alcohol. I was realizing what it was. I was like, I'm going to get brainwashed. And then granted, my brain probably does need washing, but that's what this is. It's a
Yeah.
practice. It
Yeah.
becomes religious. We're going to go to meetings. We're going to network. It does obviously scale. It has a history. It was started by a guy who took shrooms and had heavy, and if I remember right, he was Catholic or had it was part of a church or something like that. I think he was religious at one point in his life. Anyways, and so I just wanted to join the I wanted I wanted to be transformed. I was no longer I felt sick. I felt gross. I felt like I was never going to be able to get like control. Like it's scary for me like when I always blame my drinking on my ex-wife. I was like, yeah, if she wasn't here, I wouldn't be drinking this much, right? You know, and then when she left, it didn't stop. It got worse. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh,
Okay.
that means that this is systemic. It's inside. And so, you know, and I was raised with Jesus Christ. And I was like, why when I pray, this doesn't go away? Like, why would I do the thing? It doesn't, and why do I not hear him? Like other people, I go to church and they say, like, oh, I hear him, I feel him, I do this, and I'm like, the fuck are you guys talking about? I don't feel shit. It's like, and it's hard.
Yep.
And you feel lonely and you feel like and it's like, am I spiritually dead? Like, I don't know. Like, and I got questions about the scriptures that don't make sense, and like, why is it this? My dad, he gets into his theology. You know, you know, whenever we break out the Bible, it's like we got questions. We got to break out Wayne Grudem's systematic theology, which is about twice as thick as a Bible. You know, and it's like you need a PhD to really understand what's going on there, and it's so intellectualized, and it's so just it's. I'm like, like this is not what people in the desert found.
Yeah.
I can't bite that.
Not feeding
And
you.
what's that?
It's not feeding you.
No, and I've heard pastors that were like, I'm just so tired of hearing people say like I'm not being fed, and it's like, well, you're not getting involved in that, and it's like, yeah, I think there's some of that, but it's like also there's so much that people are wanting and needing to like I work with trees and I always bring them up. Apparently I'm obsessed. I didn't mean to ever be, but you work with something for 15 years and it's just like I don't know if it made me or I just eventually started seeing the world that way. I don't know, but I don't know where I was going with that. Shoot. But oh, working with tree. Oh, to make a tree, the best way to like you can't really cut them open, do surgery. You can get a little indicators, but the biggest thing is to make the soil happy and to improve the soil. And what makes the soil happy? Rotten death.
Mhm.
You know, and it's like that's what really makes soil happy. It's like all the rotten shit, like you know, get all that grass out of there. It's like it wants to be in touch with that death and that, and then you're like, and I didn't, and you say that, and then there's this image of the tree and the Bible and the garden and how they relate to people, and I had the hardest time understanding it, but it was actually a bit of Dante's Inferno. This whole idea of going down to go up, and
Mhm.
that and like how he goes down this weird drop off a cliff hit like this roller coaster U-turn and go back up and then
Yeah.
do something up in the leaves and then come back down as you know and sugars and starches flow back down, you know,
Mhm.
and it's this above being supported by below and being fed by what's below, you know, and then I even see it in my gut that my gut is like soil. It has the microbes in the soil break down nutrients so that the fine absorbing roots can absorb them, and my gut does a similar thing in my intestines, and then up here, well, there's
Mhm.
all sorts of stuff going on up here. And in between, I got a heart, you know, and so I'm starting to see these things and I'm starting to try to like tie these concepts in my head, you know, together and things like that. And I knew there was a way to natural theology. I'd heard that term before, and because I was working with trees, I was starting to, I guess, experience it. And you get really scared up there climbing trees and trimming stuff, and so I did a lot of praying up there, you know. And I, you know, I literally, I get scared. I don't, you know, if PTSD is a thing, I may have given that to myself trying to prove that I wasn't scared, you know, and that because yeah, you know, people are watching you, and you're supposed to be the guy, so you go do the thing, and then you come down and you're like, yeah, that was
I almost died.
and that, but yeah, this whole, back to like this down and up thing is that I'm realizing that like, I don't got to be scared of the storms. I don't got to be scared. They're going to get used, so like, I was also worried that I was like, I'm going to go off on a bender and I'm never going to come back or something like that. And I got to be scared of this boogeyman of alcohol, and things like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, bottom line is you feel, I know I'm predisposed to it because of the Native American blood, but I don't know how much of that's psychologically driven. I don't know how much, because they told me that as a child, that you will be this, and that, and it was like you see it in your family and you see it in that, and I'm not going to lie, it's like, yeah, I'm an anxious person, and that relief of anxiety is amazing. But it's actually that relief of anxiety that we get from alcohol, that I think that's why Eucharist has always been given with wine, is
Mhm.
that when you, and you were talking about drinking before, so I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. When you're an alcoholic or somebody that drinks a lot, you have a love relationship with alcohol. Like it's like that was there for me when the merit, when like I didn't know like how to calm myself. I didn't know how not to. I'll be completely honest. I didn't know how not to make things stop permanently. And I was
Mhm.
getting, it got really dark, really scary, and I didn't really, it was dark, but in a lot of that was alcohol driven. But at the
Mhm.
same time, like I would get these anxious, my blood pressure was up and everything like that, and that relief in my mind from alcohol when I get back to it. If we can get to that place with our relationship with Christ, it does feel the same. It's like that brain washover that you get from alcohol, like it's that spiritually, and it can happen inside your life and things like that. But it's very strange to me that alcohol has never been taken out of the Eucharist, and it's something that's, I don't know, like I want alcohol to be evil so I can just be like, and that, but it's like and then we have this concept that, yeah, for some people like myself, it's poison and it's going to kill you, and that, and I have an addictive personality. I've been told that, several
Mhm.
times, and that, and I'm like, I looked that up. That's nowhere in psychology. No, that's never been taught anywhere. It definitely, I'm sure, like, yeah, people, pick up habits really easy sometimes, things like that, but getting away from psychoanalyzing ourselves and just accepting sometimes that I'm a messy human. I fall off track. I'm a dad. I'm doing the best I can, but I get overloaded sometimes, and I don't reach for the Bible. I reach for other things, and I know I shouldn't. But these are, and it's being it's dragging that in front of the cross for me, and being like, this is where I'm at, and getting it, and also the rosary. I got a lot of mommy issues, and when getting into the Catholic Church, it was I didn't know anything about Mary or anything like that, but praying the rosary, developing a relationship. They call it Marian devotion, but
Mhm.
it's basically every good Catholic man is a mama's boy,
Mhm.
It's yeah, and it's getting in touch with that sacred mother,
Mhm.
that spiritual mother, and
Mhm.
that perfect mother, and this past year they did the Rosary in a year, and a guy named Father Mark Mary did a YouTube series on it, and so every morning he did the Rosary, but he would do he would do like mind work, I guess, basically is the way to say it, and like he was like, okay, so today we're going to be in the rose garden with Mary, and so I guess I was supposed to use my imagination. I was like, it feels weird to pray and use your imagination, but I'm just going to do that because that's what they're talking about. And so I'm doing that. And he's like, yeah, wherever your rose garden is. And before this, we had actually talked about being in Jesus's workshop with him, and then like working alongside Jesus, and how, he's like, I want you to imagine that you got like a project that you're working on, and you're really trying to focus. Jesus is over there watching, and he's really good with the tools, and he knows exactly where he's at in his workshop, and you're awkward, you don't belong. You're not a carpenter, but you're going to work alongside of him, and you're going to try. And I want you to imagine that you've been trying on this piece, and then yeah, you pressured the chisel a little too hard and blew out a corner, or you blew off a chunk, and yep, it's ruined. It's broken. That's not going to work. And he's like, and I want you to maybe even notice that you're nervous and you're anxious because Jesus the Master is right over there, and you just screwed up, and he's gonna notice real quick, and you can maybe even take a second to be like, oh man, did I pretend like you don't know if it's that bad, and it's like when it's obviously ruined and you screwed up, and like and he's like, and I want you to go over and grab another piece of wood and begin again. And he's like, and you might notice that you're surprised maybe that Jesus has placed the piece that he was working on aside and gone back and gotten another piece of wood and began again with you. And so in praying the rosary in this repetitious prayer and using my imagination. Oh, back to the rose garden. That's before I leave the subject. It was we did a similar thing with the rose garden and Mary, and he was like, you're in the rose garden. He's like, I don't know what it looks like in your head or wherever you're at. And in mine, it was like we were enclosed in a rose hedge, and I think there was like a street over there, and it was really busy all around us. Like it was all crazy. Like people were walking by, like horns, street sounds, birds, everything, just busy day. And I come into the gate, and Mary's over there. I don't know how to imagine her because I've never, obviously, but I've seen the icons and that. And so I guess my imagination does the best with what it's got and that. And so she's sitting with her face away from me. And I don't sit next to her, which was weird. I sit at her feet, and I placed my arm underneath her legs, and I put my hand on her. I guess I was on her right side, put my hand on like her left thigh, and I put my head down, and I rested on my spiritual mother's lap. And I've been able to get back to that place. And I cry. I don't know. I'm an emotional guy. It just shows up. But I've been able to get back to that place and be protected from thoughts that won't stop. And it was weird because like there's a guy named Padre Pio, and he would call this his weapon. And I was like, that's so weird. Like, what, these Catholics are so weird. They're like, and I think I kind of latched on to what he was always screaming about or talking about, because he's a weird dude. Is that when you're praying it down, the 10 of them, it's going to take some time. And if you know it and you memorized it, it's going to be there. And you're when you memorize these things, you can almost do them without thinking. But you're also tied up cognitively a bit. And so I got something in my hand. So I got something physically to keep me distracted there. Not distracted, but counting, I got to keep track of something. And then cognitively, I'm repeating something up here. And all of a sudden I realized I'm actually like in a bubble. Like that these thoughts are like not actually like this anxiousness. I was like, oh, I can take like a time out. I was like, they can't get to me. I was like, weird.
That's like, it's so funny that you say that though, because what I'm hearing you talk about, because if you're talking about, alcoholism and then like the addiction cycle, and then having something that like represents that cycle, but in a safe place. I think it's always important that we always remember that we have like neuroplasticity. So like people forget that, like, congratulations if you were healed on a dime, when you're just like miraculously healed. But for a lot of us, we have to like be mindful that these things are still very active in our brains, and our patterns are active in our brains. So even if you can have, deliverance and experience like with the Holy Spirit, that changes you slowly though. Like one of the things you were talking about, like about AA and how you were like, I don't want to like jump in because it's kind of culty. Literally, that's exactly what happened to me whenever I came back to God, is because I was like, I got COVID, actually, very ironic, actually, kind of putting the pieces together at the beginning of this year. And I was sick. Like I was sick for like a week. And part of this story too, I have to like backtrack a little bit to finish.
No, you're good. We're all over the place, so you're good.
To go back to like what happened with my husband and I, because it's a very important part of the story.
Yeah.
We decided like 5 months after us trying to like heal, and I moved down here, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get everything settled for us. We decided to get pregnant because he always wanted to have his own kids. We wanted to have multiple kids together. We weren't married yet because I didn't feel like super confident about our relationship enough to like get married. But then we had like a crazy, it's like everything was always crazy. So July of last year came around, which this is like in a couple days for the year anniversary. And we're like, we just need to like get married, like for the baby's sake, in case something happens to me or something, you know, we thought something would happen to me. So July 1st, we just like went to the courthouse and got married. And then July 10th, we had our baby. And we were still having like issues. I was like kind of a nutcase. I just had not ever healed my nervous system. I had such a hard time like getting over the infidelity. I was like, I don't know that I can get over this. Like, I do not know that I
just the up and down.
yeah, and just like your constant like, so for me, it's intense emotions or
Okay.
yes, intense emotions, like cycling in my brain. It's like, it's almost like whispering to you, all these like bad things, you know, and convincing you that people that you love are your enemy, you know, like some people would call that like the personality, you know, disorder or whatever, right? Yeah, borderline personality disorder. So I definitely like identified with that. Was in counseling for it. Nate even came to counseling with me. Anyway, so like we're working on stuff, but I went to 2-week checkup for after having the baby, and I drive home and my husband is face down in my front yard, completely unresponsive, like literally out of nowhere.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, oh my God, it was the craziest time of my life. He was like not there. I was like giving CPR on him.
Oh my gosh.
It was the crazy, I can't even.
Yeah.
I had just had a baby 2 weeks and I had a C-section. So it's like I was completely different.
You're shredded.
Thing. And I don't even know, but like we ended up losing him. Like he died that day on my front yard. And so that was talking about trials, talking about stuff, and like it was like such a mind fuck experience because I'm like, what the hell, you know, God, and I was screaming to God. I was like, God, send angels right now. I was commanding over his body. I was like, because I grew up in the church, you know, and God took him, you know, and so I'm just like, what the fuck, like, what? So like that's where like the next part started, because so not only was I dealing with the grief of losing my husband, I had a newborn child. I've already lost my parents. I lost my mom 2 years before. I was very close to. Lost my dad whenever I was 15. Right. I have 2 other children too, 15-year-old and 10-year-old. And I was still going through this pain of what happened with so I never even got to the fruits of a healed relationship. So I was still going through these bad, it was so like, it made me think like, should I have like regretted this? Like, should I have never done this? If there was a way for me to go back in time, should I have just said nope? Because it's like, why would I have walked through all of that just for him to be gone and for me to have to do this all on my own? And I struggle with that. Even like, I even had people, and this is like, there's no way for me to know that it's true because he's gone, but like I think it's just one crazy person like text me after he was gone and try to tell me, even though they were like hiding behind fake numbers, that he was having an affair up until he died. And so I know what kind of that kind of like, you revealed yourself in that. The fact that you would even do something like that is like, I'm not going to give you agency over my heart. But that's when I started to learn about the enemy. And that's when I started to learn about fear. And that's when I started to learn, because growing up in church, it put so much fear in me, so much fear in me. I remember being a scared little girl that devil and the demons were going to come out and they were going to trick me and they're going to take me away and all this stuff. So when we're talking about fear, it's like, that was all part of it. And that's the reason why I never, like, even though I was called, like I would have loved to go back to the church, but I was like, there's a part within me that's like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit together.
No.
So I was forced to like as time went on, I was like dealing with, I'm not even wanting to be here, dealing, it was just like so much shit to have to deal with.
Yep.
But then COVID, whenever I got COVID, and I was like watching YouTube for like 3 days straight with my like baby, because she got COVID too, but she was okay. And
Mm.
I just started listening to these people and their testimony. And like this one chick was talking about like her testimony out of the new age. And I don't know what it was, but she just like, it was just like, bam, like crystal clear to me. And I was just like,
Yep.
I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this right now. And I was just like, Father God, please come into my heart. Please save me. Please help me. Like
Yes. Yep.
I don't even, I just like need you, like I'm doing it.
Yep.
And the part of my brain, that neuroplasticity part, was like, you have to do things the way that like you were taught to do and you were told to do. You need to start going to church. You need to start reading the Bible. Now you have to do this. You got to quit cussing. You got to take all this crap from out of your house that like was part of this like new age stuff, right? And God specifically told me, like I felt this directly from him. He was like, I don't want you for a one night stand. I want you for long term. And I want to show you what I need to show you. I don't even like, he told me not to go to church. He was like, I
Mm.
want to show you. I want to show you. I want to reveal to you who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're talking about with your priest about getting married, and how they're like, take your time. Cause it's like, that's what a loving, like father parent, just like a partner would do, is say like, it's okay. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. Like, let me show you any like this stuff, because I wasn't convinced that like, it's like, man, you Christians are so like, you're just like scared of everything,
Yep.
So it's
Bunch of
like,
scared kids.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not convinced that like my tarot cards are bad, or that like all the chakra stuff's bad. All right. So I didn't. And like, it's so funny though, because over the last 6 months, because here's the question that was posed to me, and maybe you'll find this interesting, because you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, like this chakra stuff, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, then why can't you get rid of it?
Mm. Yeah.
And like we can pose that question to lots of things in our life when we convince ourselves that it doesn't matter. Okay, well then
Mm.
why can't then get rid of it then if it doesn't
Yeah.
matter?
Get rid of it. Yeah. No. And I think that like, yeah, there's certain, so we were talking about like voices in your heads, tearing you down. Um, I think we're in religious language. I think we're talking about angels and demons, and I did not ever understand that concept because I was taught that the Bible is literally real and these things are like literally real. So I'm like worried there's demons outside my window if I don't say my prayers. I'm worried like you, like, and I got my little Peter Pan heart and mind. So it's like, yeah, you like I'm a 30-year-old man living like in this scared, like, cause like, oh, you gotta be careful of that, you gotta be careful of that, and that, and it, yeah, there's been so much about what Christianity is, and we were brought up. It's hard to figure out where to start these conversations because like one thing I found is that like I was listening to Jordan and I'm just doing this guy seems to know what he's talking about. It's in that and he's explaining the Bible from a psychological perspective. He's talking about Cain and Abel from a psychological perspective, and that he's like did Cain ever really kill Abel literally? And it's like and he would say things like, I think that's asking the wrong question. I think it's more saying that like, is Cain always killing Abel in the heart of men? In that, and so he's bringing he's entering symbolic language in that, and that's when I get into symbolism, and that's it's probably too much to talk about right now, but it just
It's so there's so much, seriously,
oh
there's
no, you dip your toe in this stuff and all of a sudden you're like 30 feet deep, and that, but yeah, there's certain things that I've had success with getting rid of them for certain periods of time and things like that, but I'm not trying to be a perfect person anymore. I'm not even trying to be a good person. I'm not trying to like I'm kind of giving up my notions or my thoughts about what is good. in that, because it's like I've, like you were talking about, like God literally told me not to go to church. It's like, well, I'm sure that was God. Like somebody might, a Christian might say, well, I'm sure that was, and it'll doubt your experience and that, and that, and things like that. But the angels and demons thing was always, and the devil and all these types of things. These were hard concepts to wrap my head around. And what I've realized is that, because I even got into this. Did you ever get it or hear about The Master and the Emissary by Ian McGilchrist? It was a book about the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. So it was basically like talking about the left hemisphere. It's not evil, but it will get with the right. I probably shouldn't even talk about it because I don't understand it very well. But it was understanding that there are voices in my head, and I do have conversations inside my head, and that not all those voices are going to lead me up, and some of them are definitely going to lead me down. And it was identifying those that are going to lead me down and those that are going to lead me up, and that. And so, and then, because they would talk about, like in the Orthodox, they talk about like everybody gets a demon and an angel, and just like the little cartoon picture, evil ones on your left and the good ones on your right, and you're like, golly, this stuff seems weird, like I don't know. And I would get uncomfortable because they would be explaining things different than what I was raised with, and that. And I'm like, and it's the church, but it's the it's the Catholic Church. It's like it's stuff. And so I'm like, am I joining? It feels weird. It feels like you're possibly like joining a cult or something like that. And they're but it's all somehow happening, and then it's also making sense at the same time. And that and it was realizing that, yeah, I have demons, like literal, like things that are inside of me that are calling out for my destruction. And sometimes I'm weak and give into those. And if I claim that I don't, I'm probably being dishonest. In that. And if I really examine my life, even if I haven't, sometimes, a lot of times in our human mind, we rank order our sins, like, he got drunk last night, that's really, really bad, versus the guy that, maybe said this, harsh thing or ruined somebody's day with a harsh comment or whatever. And it's like, I'm really trying to pull back from being able to think that I have the ability to judge reality, that I have this ability to look at something like history and be like, oh, those were the good guys and the bad guys, and realizing that what I've even identified in my own life as, previously as like, oh, that's good. You did really good on that day. And it's like, I'm just kind of like, I'm realizing that I don't know how much of that was, even me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how much of that guy's even still, what am I? Like, you know what I mean? Like, who am I?
Well, and we kind of like, I feel like, because I was actually just studying like being tested, being tempted and being trialed like earlier today, because it was something that I didn't understand. I do believe one of my ultimate, like the higher up beliefs, is that the ultimate truth is that God can use absolutely everything for his glory. However, I don't think that it's like a biblically correct view to assume that God would ever tempt us to sin. So it's really important that we see, and that's what I learned like today, because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like intuitively, who the character of God is would not tempt us to sin. So we have to think about testing and trials in a different way. But what's happening is that what we actually do is we knowingly or unknowingly give agency to the accuser. So whenever we're doing something that's not wrong, like I have changed the definition of sin in my mind to help me understand it, to mean pain, and for it to mean separated me from God. So that I need to remove the shame and the blame, because that's where I grew up with. And that I need to be cleansed from that so that I can see God in his like true identity. And so a big part of that is just understanding why that particular thing would separate you from God, and then making choices based off of that, and then understanding when you give agency, because he can't just like swoop in and save you all the time. It's like you're giving your agency away. So like when we're talking about, if we have things that are trying to talk to us, convince us of things, and trying to tempt us to sin or tempt us to get away from God, then I believe it's something like very serious. And like, I actually, whenever I pray every single night and every single morning. The biggest thing I pray is for protection over myself, my family, my friends. Because I feel like there's warfare going on out there, and I do have what's called a divine council worldview. So I believe that the fall of the rebellion is actually like powers that are still very much alive in our world, and we probably can't even imagine. I think what you're saying too is part of this, where you can't imagine how much it's intertwined in our human life right now. Like there's no way for us to know how much it literally is like intertwined with us.
No, and that's like I tried to get into Jungian psychology. I thought I could approach it that way, and like trying to tear into the mind and like get into the shadow and all this kind of
But you
stuff.
don't have to do all that. That's the whole thing.
No,
Like, that's what I learned, is that it's like, because that's what the new age, that's what the occultic,
yeah,
it tries to tell you that there's these little secrets that you have to unlock. And it's like, no, that's
gnosis.
why we have a savior. That's why we don't, I don't,
Yeah,
it's not my job anymore. But
yeah,
the biggest thing that helped me is seeing people like you are, like you, me, all of us, we are sacred, we are beautiful, we are
yes,
perfect, and God did create us to be perfect. What happened is that he also gave us free will, because he loves us and wants us to have free will. Some of us chose that this rebellion, this other path, in lots of different ways throughout history, right? And so I always, like, one of my prayers is like, God, give me the vision so I can see people the way that you see people. And so I have to be really, really clear on what is not God's talking, what is not God's influence, and not give it agency, because it'll just get its little hooks in there, and it'll affect you in
yeah,
different ways. And even if we're talking about AA, alcoholism, all that stuff, that is the biggest reason why even though like me losing my husband, it's the first time I've gone through grief sober, and holy shit, it taught me so much,
mm,
and it helped me heal faster and more holy than I have ever healed in my life. And so it taught me about how these things that we think that they don't do, that they don't affect us, it's like we don't see that we're giving it agency, because we know that it's not from God, right? We know that we could say that maybe, of course, with the wine I can see in the Bible and stuff. And so like I don't really touch that much, but I know that in our culture it's turned into something very different than like that, the sacred connection. And I am going to have to leave here in just a minute. But
oh yeah,
so
yeah,
that's what I see as like I'm like the deliverance part, the like I'll straight be like casting out demons like constantly, just like, because I just feel like I'm called that, like not enough people are doing that. And I believe that prayers like literally have an effect in the spiritual
oh yeah,
realm. And so if I have any prayers, and also another thing that I don't do whenever I pray for people that I feel like are having a hard time, I don't say things like, oh God, they're so broken, I hope they find you, blah, blah, blah. I don't, because you're literally praying discouragement over them. So instead, and I grew up with discouragement, and through Christianity, it was all intertwined in shame and all this stuff. So like instead, like whenever I pray for people, even if I know if they're struggling, I speak those words of encouragement on them, of who God sees them, so that they can be uplifted for who, like our identity in Christ, and then also pray for protection over them from any of like the evil doing. So like that's shifted completely my relationship with God, and how I like do the God thing,
yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and I was never able to get there. Like I was never like in a outside of the Catholic Church, I was never able to get there. I think I have a critical thinking demon in my head or something, and I always get hung up on like the wrong details about like why am I at church? Like I should have just identified that reason, and then like, but I'm not really good at paying attention, staying on track, and I critically think about things and over-examine them and overthink them, and yeah. So one of the things that's been very helpful for me at the Catholic Church is just to show up, and to just start practicing. Just start practicing, just pick it up. Don't and that's what they told me was like, however you got here is however you got here. It's 10:30 Sunday, you're at mass, you're at the right place at the right time. And I was like, okay. And then it was like, and for me, and this is like some of the things we say out loud is like, you're like, am I going to be judged for that? But I felt we were working on a one of the older with the guys at the Knights of Columbus. He's been going to the church for a long time, and I don't know where he's at spiritually. I don't know, but I do know that he loves the Catholic Church, and he's one of the guys that does the Knights of Columbus and things like that. And we're on the side of the church. We're dealing with some stuff, and we got some water turned on, and we realized the sprinklers broke. He's like, "Yeah, we got to go check out these sprinklers over here." And so we're walking over there, and he's like, "Ah, shit!" And he's like, "It busted." And I was like, I just felt so at home there because I was like, "You're a real
Hi,
dude."
people.
And my people, and I was like, and it was like because it was like, and Father was standing over there, and sometimes the guys are like, "Oh, my bad, I set that up," but like a lot of these old Catholic guys and that, you know, it's just dealing with a different type of Christian, and I don't, and it's Christians that have been in my town my entire life, and I have saw them, but I never knew. I was like, no, that's a different type of Christian. That's not my people or whatever, and then to feel so at home amongst working class guys that are just showing up and doing the thing, and that, and we were talking, and I know you got to go, so I don't want to open, if we open another subject, but it's for me the agency thing, and that was something that came up on that little corner of the internet. I got introduced to that term there about giving agency, and there's one guy that talks about how there is no actual agency, and getting more into like how does the self really even exist, and that, and what, in that conversation, and I think there's a lot to that conversation. I think some people, you got to get there, it's scary to peer into the abyss and to think of nothingness and to think of the fact that we won't exist one day with this body. Like I'm gonna die, and this body's gonna die, and that, and we have faith and hope and trust in this spiritual resurrection, and that would be new bodies, and that, but that's, I mean, we're talking about things that are so hard to wrap your head around. Well, like, like I'm on a Zoom call in reality right now, but I have, an invisible person that I talk to in my head, and I run everything by, and I'm praying to a woman that, that that died over 2,000 years ago, and I believe is very spiritually alive and active. And when I say I pray to her, what the word pray means in the Orthodox is ask for help. So like if I pray you to me, it's like, hey, I need your help, and that. And so it's not a worshiping, it's a venerating, as though as Mary is viewed as the Ark of the Covenant symbolically, in that she carried Christ as inside her stomach, as the perfect, she did exactly what God asked her to do, and she was perfectly obedient, and she took on a task that was impossible, and she was obedient to the end, and actually fulfilled, did the thing that, and that, and so, and it's in the strongest person that we get introduced to, the one that's able to house the perfect, be the perfect vessel, and that, and when the Ark of the Covenant is this very strong box, that is, and that, and to see this little 14-year-old girl being asked, and then to see her complete, to read the story, and that, and like, again, I start entering literal things into the story of like, yeah, did she really do that? No, nobody could ever do that, and then, but to trust the story,
Yeah.
as I can't even remember what happened yesterday. So I don't know what truth is, honestly. I think it has a time span. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can't remember, like we could probably, well, like, what was the most important thing that happened 3 weeks ago at 1 o'clock?
Right.
I don't, no, nobody's gonna be able to give you that answer. And whatever answer you get is most likely filtered through so many other hive mind things. And yeah, so as far as the historicity of this story, yes, I believe it was the singularity. I think that the perfect person showed up on the earth at the exact right time. Now can I articulate that or prove that or give it a debate about? No, but it's like, but that's what I'm holding on to in my head is that something happened 2,000 years ago, and it was really big, and it really today would look a lot different if that hadn't happened. There's a book called Dominion by Tom Holland. He talks about the Western world basically being built by Judeo-Christian values, and like when you start thinking of that, and like yeah, man, it just gets crazy, the history. And I know you got to go, so I'll wrap it up. But it's in my head. I've asked the Holy Spirit to possess me, just like a person. We know that demon possession is real, so spiritual possession is real. And if I don't want to be possessed by a demon, I'm going to pray that Jesus Christ possess me. I want to be possessed, because I don't trust, sometimes I don't trust my own mind. Sometimes I don't trust, these things. And I don't know that I can or should, because my very gut bacteria can influence my decisions. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like fasting, I think clearly, but honestly, when I think clearly about 2:00, I'm a little thin, and I'm pretty impatient in that. And I do a lot of manual labor, and I don't eat. I eat once a day, and that. And the reason I'm working for myself right now is because I blew up at work and over in Durango, and that. I wasn't happy there. I knew I wanted to quit, and something got said. They talked about sending me home that day, and I said, "Oh, I'm going home." And I was like, "But we're gonna make some phone calls, and Josh is gonna have a little bit of a thing to say." And yeah. So it was a full on hour interaction, and I've never burnt a bridge at work in my life, or at least not intentionally or anything. And this happened, and I was like, I went to the Catholic Church immediately after over in Durango, and the sanctuary happened to be opened. I think they were going to have a 12:00 mass, but it was like 10:30 or something like that. And I just went in there and cried. I just went in there. I sat at the back and I started to cry. I was kneeling, and then nobody was coming in. So I was like, I just went up and I just sat there in front of the altar, and Mary was over there, and Joseph, and Christ is on the cross. And I just cried. I was like, I don't know what I just did. I don't know if I just jeopardized my whole family's future. I don't know if I screwed up royally. I don't know if I just didn't eat today. Maybe I just made the biggest mistake of the next 5 years, or whatever. And I got all this anxiety running through me like a river, and everything like that. And I'm like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to sit here, cry, and pray. So I did that. And then I realized, and as I've been working for myself, getting back to that, I'm realizing I never should have taken that job in the first place. I took it because I was scared. I was scared because there wasn't enough money in the bank account, and I thought I needed steady pay. I thought I needed consistency. I had screwed up, a little bit of tax stuff. I didn't have enough money to pay taxes, so I was going to have to borrow money. Figured out later there's nothing to be worried about, because I could have filed an extension plan and paid it off gradually, and it would have been fine. But I was over here on Tax Act trying to figure out my taxes. I'm freaking out, and I'm still smoking weed at this point, and so anxiety's running, and it's there's all sorts. I'm a mess, but it's it's realizing that I'm a mess, and I'm okay with that today. Because I went, I went to church, and we went out to eat with a family. I invited my aunt along, who's also she's not really practicing anymore, but she was a little Catholic girl in France. She was raised in France, and we had a great family, get together. I don't know if I should. I don't know if like alcohol is something that I'll drop completely. I don't know. I'm not really making those decisions right now. And maybe I will. I don't know. But I don't know what tomorrow holds. Yeah. No,
like,
and it's like,
once we force ourselves to do things, I feel like that's not what sticks. It's whenever it just like gradually falls away from us.
Yeah. And I'm a very force myself to do things guy, like cold showers. No, cold showers. Like I didn't like that at all, but I knew they were good for me, and I could see some results from it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to force myself to do the 1-minute cold shower, pretty much every day. And so now it's just a part of my routine. But at the beginning, dude, waking up at 4:30, trying to turn cold water on and hop in there.
Oh, yeah. I did all that. I get it.
And so I was
extreme anymore. I can be a little bit more gentle, but this is for the first time in my life. So, but I do have to run. But
you get out of here.
I want to talk to you more, because I actually know nothing about Catholicism, nor has it ever really even come up in any of my studies. So I would really love to know, what brought you to it and the things that like spoke to you the most. So let's plan on having another conversation in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll do this again. And this one really good. Thank you. And I think this is exactly what we're supposed to do today.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate you and I'm thankful for you and I will pray for you and your family and congratulations on
I will
everything.
do likewise. We'll do likewise. All right. Adios. All right. Let's get
You
out
have
of
a
here.
good night.
You have a good night. God bless.
You too. Bye.
Adios.